Okay, nice to have you with us. If it's the first time you're joining us on Mansfield today, welcome to it. If you were with us yesterday for Business with Chris Gibbons, today being a Tuesday, every Tuesday we look at legal issues. Our legal expert is Advocate Lance Brogden. Lance, nice to have you with us again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great to be here
today. Yeah,
Thank you.
For the first one, I'm not saying again for the first time. Let's take a look at something I hate to kick this show off, and that's reading through reams and reams of contracts. People come to you and they want you to do something, and then they slap you with this whole thing of contracts, and I can't stand looking through them. They irritate me. What are the pointers about contracts, and what are the challenges that arise from contracts?
Thanks, Jeremy. I think this is a great one to start with because it is very, very real. There are a couple of points that I think lead to problems with contracts and the execution thereof. One very important point is that the expectations of the parties do not always gel. What I'm hearing and what you're telling me are not the same. That's a big issue that comes up, is clarifying the expectations of the parties. Often, to get a contract done quickly, people commit to something and they have not thought through what's really required of them. Just saying, yes, I'm in, let's go for it. Thirdly, we all sign too quickly. Jeremy, we all sign too quickly. and that brings a lot of problems. I think there are one or two people that have a naive idea that I can quickly change the contract later. Let's get going, but later on I'll change it. It'll work better for us later. And very important, and we'll get to that, and Jeremy, I think this is critical, the complexity around verbal contracts. Okay? Well, big problem.
Where does one stand regarding verbal contracts?
Well, undoubtedly, verbal contracts are as valid as written contracts, except in a few cases. We'll probably touch on that just now. They are as valid. The problem with verbal contracts is proving the result if it hasn't been reduced to writing and signed by the parties. And I think that's the biggest problem, is people say, well, we had a chat and we agreed on this. What now? Another one to be careful of, just in the back of your minds. Often in a written contract, there's a clause in it that says, unless both parties agree to changes to this contract and it's reduced to writing, okay, it cannot be done. Please keep that in mind. If it's a written contract, anything verbal thereafter, in the pub, around the corner, doesn't count.
What contracts have to be in writing?
Okay, this is quite important. In South Africa, it varies a bit around the world, but in South Africa and generally in the Western world, first contract that must be in writing is the sale of fixed property. That could be the house, the building, or the land. Okay, that must be in writing. Secondly, and very importantly, are suretyship agreements. Suretyship agreements must be reduced to writing. Then credit agreements. Okay, a credit agreement must be in writing. And there are two more. The next one we call an anti-nuptial contract or a prenup, as I say in America. That's the contract between two parties before, that's why it's ante, before they get married. And my gut feel, Jeremy, it should actually be called a divorce contract because it only comes into play at the end of the day when, unfortunately, people part ways. And then another important one is when the leases exceed 10 years. If you have a lease for more than 10 years, which is very rare and I advise strongly against it, that has to be reduced to writing. And finally, there's another one with executionary donations. So donations down the line, out of, whether it be a trust or whatever, those have to be reduced to writing. But that's about it. All the rest can be verbal. But remember, you have to prove it. You can't just say, he said, she said, I said, they said. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, then what are the basic, very basic components of a contract?
Okay, well, firstly, a contract is one party makes an offer and the other party accepts the offer. That is the formal thing. But there are four primary elements. The one is the offer. I just mentioned the offer now. The second is the consideration. Could be the price, the quid pro quo. That's important. Then the third part, as I said, is the acceptance. So we have an offer, we have a value, and we accept. But very importantly, and people often forget this, a contract to be binding must bind both parties. Okay, we call that mutuality. Both parties must have obligations that flow from this.
Okay, so there comes Jeremy Mansfield. sits down and he signs a contract with Lance Brogden.
The famous case of Brogden versus Mansfield.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And 3 months down the line, this is not working for me. Okay, whatever the contract is about. How do I get out of that? Can I?
Rule 1 in principle, no, you can't. My proposal, to be practical, is if one encounters that sort of an issue, is earlier than later sit with the other party and visit a way around it. Because at the end of the day is, if we're in dispute, it's going to be a long, drawn-out litigation and a painful exercise and a costly exercise. We want to avoid that, of course. But there are a couple of contracts that can be voided, cancelled, and you can walk away from them. I'll quickly touch on them without boring you, and please don't misread this and try and have your current contract that you don't like and try and fit into one of these categories. The one is where it's grossly unfair. Okay, it's called unconscionable, which means that in any formal and informal environment, it's regarded as completely unfair from the one party against the other. Example, your cell phone provider changes in the middle of the period of your contract to an exorbitant rate, your fees, you might be able to exit that one. Secondly, when the other person, what we call, gives up. Okay, so this is quite important. Your personal trainer no longer arrives to give you your training, your gym training, and it just isn't there. Well, sure, you can pull out of that, and you can. Okay, the other party gives up, or the other party breaches the contract. For example, I employ a lady to do a painting for me for my home. She does the painting, then sells it to somebody else. Okay, she's breached it already, so I can then walk away from that. And finally, fraud. You know, if, for example, I want to go and buy a car, and I go to a dealer and I buy the car, and the dealer says, okay, this car is in very, very good condition. I drive it out of the shop and it packs up. Jeremy, the end of the day is, it doesn't have to be that the person did that willfully and intentionally. It could be that the person selling the car didn't check it out.
Okay.
So those are the sort of examples where a contract is voidable.
Lang, finally, because we're running out of time, before you enter into a, what would you call it, a contractual arrangement, is that the right
Absolutely.
wording? What should you bear in mind before you even enter into that contract?
A couple of pointers, and this is pointers for all of us, and we all make these mistakes. One, never take a contract or agreement lightly. Verbal as well. I told you about the difficulty of proving verbal, but don't take it lightly. Never commit to anything that you're not totally sure you can fulfill. You buy a car, you realize I can probably pay for this car on a monthly basis. However, be careful, you still have to run that vehicle, service it, pay for it to be looked after, etc., etc. So be careful that you can actually fulfill your deal of the commitment. Don't feel scared, Jeremy, to let somebody else, doesn't have to be a legally trained person, have a look at it and get another opinion on your contract. Very importantly, when you commit to something, before you sign it, sleep on it. If one day is going to make a massive difference, you don't want to do that contract. Sleep on it. You'll be surprised the next morning. If we're in a pub, I say to you, if you can drink 10 pints in 5 minutes, and I will give you $1,000 if you do it, rather sleep on it, because we're both going to be in big trouble. And I'll probably lose. That's the Mansfield versus Brogden case.
Lance, always a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to a long engagement going forward here on Mansfield Today.
Jeremy, thank you, and good luck with this fantastic show. Thank you very much.
Advocate Lance Brogden, who is our legal expert here on Mansfield Today. If you like the show, then like it on Facebook. Also share it with your friends. And if you're looking for it on YouTube, or you know somebody who's looking for these particular programs on YouTube, remember it's Mansfield Today with the number 2 and then no spaces in between. Okay, no spaces whatsoever. Mansfield Today on YouTube. If you've got any questions you'd like Lance to start looking at throughout the course of these conversations, then you can get hold of him by sending him an email to legal@mansfieldtoday.com. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be looking at things medical with our resident GP, Dr. Vicky Skitter. That's coming up in tomorrow's show on Mansfield Today. Until then, thanks for joining us and goodbye.